Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's live webinar. Anderson Kill is pleased to present Navigating the Evolving Landscape of AI and Cyber Insurance. We are pleased to present to you this afternoon's program. Okay. Before we begin, we'd want to make sure that everyone's aware that the views that are expressed are those of the participants and not those of their employers, their clients, or other organizations. The opinions expressed do not represent legal advice or risk management advice. The views discussed are for educational purposes only and provided only for use during this session. With that, we are pleased to present this program and hand it over to Mark Sheen.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm truly excited to be here with you all today with Anderson Kill's Navigating the Evolving Landscape of AI and Cyber Insurance seminar. Our focus today is on trends and potential coverage implications arising out of the increasing use of artificial intelligence, provide the latest information on how the insurance marketplace is responding, and provide some guidance on how to address generative AI and how it may impact insurance programs. Generative AI represents a type of artificial intelligence that can create new and believable content, such as highly technical text, realistic audio, and lifelike images. Since the launch of generative AI technologies in late 2022, the speed and scale of generative AI adoption has been absolutely remarkable, and it is expected to only increase with time, with some estimates saying by the end of 2025, roughly 10% of all data will be the result of generative AI creations. As organizations continue to investigate the use and ultimately the adoption of generative AI, insurers are starting to consider the potential risks associated with the increasing use of generative AI and how those risks are dealt with in existing insurance policies and whether new insurance policies are going to be required. Cyber risk and the impact of artificial intelligence risk on insurance programs is one of the most critical and rapidly evolving challenges facing the insurance industry today. In an era when digital connectivity drives business innovation, cyber threats have become more sophisticated and frequent. At the same time, artificial intelligence is reshaping the risk landscape, introducing new vulnerabilities, but also new opportunities for risk assessment and risk mitigation. Today, we're going to explore how AI-driven risks are influencing the way insurers design, price, and manage cyber insurance programs. We're also going to dive into emerging trends, regulatory considerations, and practical strategies to help you stay ahead of this dynamic environment. Our goal is to equip you with insights and tools needed to navigate these complexities of cyber and AI risk, ensuring your insurance programs remain resilient, adaptive, and forward-looking. I encourage you to think of companies into three types of categories in today's presentation. One, companies that are creating these large language models. Two, companies that are customizing and altering these large language models. And three, companies that are just utilizing these large language models. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our STEAM panel today. First, we have Brendan McGowan from Arete. Brendan is the Director of Incident Response at Arete. He is responsible for some of their most complex projects. Arete provides a comprehensive approach to cyber threat management by providing real-time holistic view of the threat landscape. Next, we have Chris Ballard. Chris is a partner at Mullen Coughlin's Incident Response Practice, the largest privacy-only law firm in the United States. Now, prior to that, Chris has led 6 digital forensics and incident response teams, as well as incident recovery teams. Josh Gold is a shareholder at Anderson Kill's New York office and serves as the chair of the Cyber Insurance Recovery Group. He's represented numerous corporate and nonprofit policyholders in various industries, with recoveries for his clients well north of $1.5 billion. And lastly, but not least, we have Marshall Galinsky, who is a shareholder in Anderson Kill's Boston office, practices in the firm's insurance recovery group, and is a leader within Anderson Kill's AI practice. Today's presentation, we are going to address certain questions to certain panelists, but to the other panelists, we certainly want to make this an engaging conversation. So if the question is not addressed to you, please wait for the person to respond and then feel free to jump in. With that being said, Brendan, let's start with you. What are some ways that threat actors are leveraging artificial intelligence in cyber attacks in 2026?
Yeah, so Chris, I kind of want to come across as AI as a really powerful tool. And one of the things I'm going to say, some of these are going to touch upon some negative aspects of AI. I don't want to come across as saying the sky is falling, but just something to keep in mind how threat actors are using AI in their day to day, right? So brute force AI is a tool set that allows threat actors to enumerate attacks against either web portals or attempts on logins. What we're seeing is with these tool sets in AI and automation process is a reduction of the skill set needed to kind of enter into this threat landscape, right? So brute force AI is one of the tools that we're currently seeing. One of the kind of scarier tools out there is prompt lock. It's a generative AI tool which is going to create real-time scripts. The problem with these real-time scripts and no patterns is a lot of behavioral analysis is done on IOCs and TTPs. So as this is being done on the fly, it does make it harder to detect. The other thing with prompt lock is we're going to see things that may affect Chris and what he might talk about in his slides are more around the fact of it's gonna be more efficient with data exfiltration. So it's going to be able to target what data it wants to take out, maybe what data it wants to leave behind and encrypt and leave inside the environment. Better phishing attempts. We're not going to see those really bad, poor grammar, poor spelling. We're going to see much more OSINT, much more research into the individuals when we're doing spear phishing attacks, um, pulling information from social media, their LinkedIn profiles. So very, very targeted phishing attempts. Some of the other things are, be aware of deep fakes, right? It only takes 3 seconds to create a generative voice campaign. We've seen campaigns back in 2021 where an individual miswired $34 million based on believing that they were interacting with their manager. And then another 24 event where they were deepfake video based. And that was a $24 million loss. So AI is alleviating a lot of the hurdles in the threat actors, maybe technical skill sets. So we're letting lower skill sets into this. Also, AI automation around exploitation and reconnaissance of environments and networks.
I was
Yeah.
wondering if you could, sorry, Chris.
Oh, I was gonna jump on real fast to say, Brendan is humble and isn't gonna oversell his skills, so I'm gonna sell them right here and now to say one of the things that I am absolutely seeing right now is when threat actors do employ AI, you can really separate the Brendans, the Arates of the world from those who don't do forensics quite as much or are not as necessarily savvy in that you'll actually see the forensic team or the security team kind of not knowing what to do with it. And an example there is, incidents, and this hasn't just been one, where there's been a report, oh, there's 20,000 logins over the span of only 2 weeks. So therefore, everything that it touches that is touched during that login is data at risk, which of course is nonsense, right? You don't have true access or acquisition over that time. That's a tool checking to see if there's been a response on a spam bomb campaign. But the difference in at least one case has been, do we inform 1.5 million people or not? So that's a major issue for the blue team, the defenders. And thankfully, we've got, Brendan and his team out there who know exactly what to do with that information.
And a lot of these tools that are being made for the AI side of the house are initially being set up and made for the red team, right, to identify and penetration test and deserve these weaknesses. And then they're being kind of much like the reconnaissance tools we see used by everyday system admins and network admins. They're being turned over to threat actors, right? They're being turned into nefarious tools.
So I think that's a perfect segue into kind of the next question is, some of the ways that AI is being leveraged with these organizations, but specifically with respects to incident response, data mining, and really kind of enhanced security.
Yeah. So really when it comes to data mining, AI is going to process data faster and go through data sets faster than a human is, right? It still needs human validation to kind of vet out some of those AI findings, but AI is going to purge through that sensitive data much, much faster. So initial steps are going to be run through kind of an AI and then validated through human. When you get into something like an EDR platform and AI SIM, again, EDR and automation is going to be much faster than human. So reacting on those alerts, locking down accounts, restricting machines, using that AI platform and that AI knowledge base, we're going to be able to move faster and kind of align ourselves quicker to response. And then we're going to be able to do that human validation on the back end. So really you're going to see a lot more AI-driven tasks within EDR solutions, SIM platforms, log aggregation, and kind of automation in that piece. Data mining has really kind of been using AI for a little bit though there.
And so just to always be the voice of negativity, I guess. To go back to how we're seeing it used on the bad side, a couple of things there. One is we can data mine maybe a little more efficiently, hopefully one day. Not necessarily seeing a lot of that yet, and controlling costs. I know that that's coming. But the bad guys can also data mine, which means when you're in a negotiation and you have some sensitive data that it looks like they might have touched, which is going to drive up a potential ransom demand. The bad guys in the past maybe didn't know they had it. Now they can ask an AI, hey, do I have something like a piece of litigation file? Can you go find out of whether or not this was suppressed in a piece of litigation? That could be potentially damaging as well. So you got a couple of issues there. The other thing is I had the distinct pleasure, I guess, honor, I don't know what you'd call it, last year of having my first double deepfake case where a an entity had the CFO got an invite for a Teams meeting. There was a major transactional lawyer and her CEO were on the call. She listened to them go back and forth about a transaction, ended up wiring money at the instruction of the CEO based on this transaction. Thought it was a little bit off, but didn't really pay too much attention. But she had her CEO on. It turns out both of these folks have a lot of YouTube video, and neither of them were real. And so she wired money to Hong Kong to a threat actor, which and we got to find out about how much fun that is. But we did get the money back, thankfully. But we still had to pay a lot of money to get it.
And Chris, I just want to hit on one other point that you were kind of talking about there is their ability to dig through and sift through that quantity of data faster does make negotiation tactics a little bit harder. If they know the data that they have, if they know it, the sensitivity of the nature, it's going to make negotiation for either payment for proof of deletion or decryption a little bit more of a tactic when it comes to the negotiation teams as well.
That's right. So tool and a tool for both sides. You know, one
Yeah.
more thing just to get in that I can't. This blows my mind, and I'm going to be too talkative and share it. There is a report from a team that we work closely with that an item of litigation went all the way to arbitration. They testified and said, no, this insider threat didn't steal the information. And the other side, which had prosecuted the litigation with an $800 million demand, said, yes, this employee did. At the end of the day, it all came down to the log files showing data out. And they said there's so much data that went out. Uh, and in fact, it turned out that the team prosecuting the litigation had relied on AI modeling, and AI had transposed bytes in with bytes out, which means there wasn't data going out, there was data coming in. The whole litigation, two major defense firms with their bills, all of that was for nothing because there was reliance on AI without double checking it. To Brendan, to your point.
Yeah.
Great feedback. Kind of shifting gears, similar topic. Thinking about ransomware. Can't have a cyber conversation without ransomware. How is that changing with the use of artificial intelligence, or is it? And then any type of trends that you guys are seeing within ransomware since 2025, looking forward into 2026.
Yeah, so 2026 is a little bit early. One of the new things we're starting to see in 2026, and we're trying to see if this is leading up to potentially future kind of staging for attacks, is threat actors interacting with Microsoft Copilot. So even in BECs, starting to interact with Copilot. So that's kind of a newer trend that we're seeing in the market. One of the things that we're seeing, and Chris, you've seen it too, we saw a very, very heavy August, which was driven by Akira. We are still seeing Akira as one of the front runners within the landscape, followed up by Quillen, which is kind of, hot in their trails, but I don't think it's going to surpass Akira anytime this year. We are also seeing a decrease in our ransomware as service groups, which is a little bit interesting to see coming off of a hot 2025. EDR bypass solutions with vulnerable bring your own devices is still coming in and 2026. So um, new trends I would say is Copilot, but we're seeing kind of the same old tactics in 2025 with Curie leading the pace of the market.
Yeah, I can't stress enough, Brendan. I'm 100% with you. There's there's this perception that there's cool new stuff out there, so it's going to get that's what it's all going to be about. This is still about lowest common denominator, each
Hmm.
attack. The bad guys, the Akira, I think 100 out of the 4,500 that Mullen Coughlin did last year, and I round down by the way. We had like 127 of the Akiras that we had, the ransomware Akira attacks we had, were all related to either exploitation of a vulnerability in SonicWall, which means they simply did something, to exploit a bug in the code on this device that touches the internet, or based on their theft of information from SonicWall in what was called the My SonicWall Cloud incident. So, without kind of getting into what are all those things, it, I would have told you the same story or something like it in 2024. They haven't had to change their tactics. Once they can get in and bypass authentication and harvest credentials, they're home free and they look like administrators and they get to steal the data, still stealing data, and there's still no magic bullet tool out there that's going to catch them. So there's tools that increase those odds, but it comes down to you can a lot of times Brendan is reporting, hey, I can see the whole incident in the tool, all the alerts that came out, but nobody could check them because there isn't a 24/7 security operations center that's online when Russia's online. So largely stayed the same, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think, when we saw very, very heavily exploitation of perimeter devices like we saw in August, Chris, that was really around those two vulnerability sets back to back. We're starting to see an uptick in stolen compromised credentials leading into 2026. So is it going to replace vulnerabilities? No, I don't think so. I think we're still going to see another rash of exploits against perimeter devices sometime this year. And I think the good news is we did see the takedown of a breach forum by the feds just recently. I think yesterday, Ramp was taken down. So that was, we are proactively seeing stuff happen, which is good to hear. Sometimes it takes a very, very long time to take these threat actors and leak sites and chat sites down. So there is still hope of some of this getting taken offline.
So, kind of understanding that this could be a good thing and somewhat creating, I guess, additional risk or exposure. What role is it playing in the automated recon and target selection of potential targets?
Automated tools like Strike, right, which is now baked into some nefarious tools that are used by both red team and threat actors. Strike is a tool where you can basically automate your assessment of vulnerabilities, right? You can run it against a particular target. It will come back, report back what the vulnerabilities are, and then recommendations on what are the ways to exploit those, right? So as a red teamer, that's great. We can patch the holes. But if you're nefarious and a threat actor, this is great. Now I've got the keys to the castle. I can go figure out my way in. We haven't actually seen this in engagement quite yet, but it is going to be something that's going to be very scary if we do see it. So a lot of these automation, like I said before, it's lowering the bar of entry. So you're not going to have this in-depth tool set where we've seen in the past. We're going to see AI kind of alleviating that heavy lifting of the skill set. So we're going to see, um, smaller players getting into the space is my guess.
Or threat actors are vibe coding, right? You can vibe code that
Yeah,
term, a term for you don't have to actually learn how to code. You can just put it into AI to develop your scripts and what have you.
modern day script kiddies, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and on the negotiation side, we're seeing that the threat actors used to always run Zoom data. They got smarter. They grabbed the insurance policies. They go right
Mm.
through the insurance policies and the financial statements, and they're the documents that they would open and look at to negotiate against you. So again, kind of thinking in terms of if I have a client who is saying we've been in business for 90 years, all of the data I need, we just digitized and 10 years ago, and now it's all encrypted. If I don't get my data back, I lay off a bunch of people and I'm out of business. Well, that's a situation they may want to pay. They may end up having to pay one of these guys. If they do have to pay the threat actor, you don't want that number to be through the roof. So if the threat actor has information more easily at their fingertips, which I'm not seeing too much, but there's definitely been examples where we've seen both threat actors kind of increase what they ultimately were able to recover based on kind of knowledge of the company and what the company's situation was, more accurately price where it is, which makes a client more inclined to want to pay. And also go way off on a tangent because the AI got it completely wrong and picked a different company and come in with a poor negotiating position that made everything difficult. So mixed bag.
Yeah, and especially if they do have those insurance contracts, it's very hard to explain to a threat actor how insurance works. That just because that policy may be 1 million, 3 million, that is not the total number the threat actor is going to get, right? That is a very hard negotiation tactic to pull away from. And I've also seen where the threat actor looks up the wrong company, or there's a company name that's very similar, and the revenue targets on Zoom Info are astronomically different. Talking that down, talking that to no, this isn't the client you think this is, it's very hard, right? Because they think we're lying, we think they're lying. It's a constant game of cat and mouse with them in that.
And there's also, of course, the issue of the OFAC regulations and restrictions. So, if it's challenging to have that discussion with a threat actor on insurance coverage issues, they're probably not keen to hear about whether or not the wallet's on an SDN list or a particular member of a hacking gang is suspected to be on it. And certainly the insurance companies may ask questions in that regard too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I do see that we have a question that came out of this conversation. So, kind of keeping it in scope here, the question is: given that threat actors search for insurance and negotiate based on that, should policyholders make the policy findable, or should cyber policies be like K&R, kidnap and ransom policies, and be kept secret? My humble opinion, and I think that I'm not a negotiator, right? Obviously, I've seen plenty of them, but and where I've had to, I've been involved. I like to say this is an art that is not the same as going in and trying a case or doing a mediation. It's a hostage negotiation. So I call arete because day in day out they're doing a very different kind of specialty. So, with all of that disclaimer, generally I like to say if they don't, the less information they have that could compromise our negotiation, the better. And that's our single biggest piece because they don't understand eroding policies. They don't understand claims aggregation. They don't understand policy expiration. If somebody left a policy from 1990, they might think that that's the current policy. I'd rather see it kept air gapped if possible then heck, and I don't ever quote me on this. I know it's being recorded, but I'd rather see it in somebody's email where the threat actor is less likely to find it than stored in a folder that says insurance policies.
Yeah,
I think this is purely selfish motivation on my part, but I would agree because it does make my job a little bit easier when I don't have to fight uphill on that as well. We're in negotiations, sometimes we get negotiations and clients think that this is a standard business transaction, right? I'm going to increase my demand. They're going to lower their offer. I'm working with a criminal. So it is not a, a, a negotiation that typically is as you would expect, right? This is kind of sometimes unhinged, aggressive behavior from the threat actor, and we're trying to subdue and kind of appease them as we're process. So very different type of negotiation than some people are used to.
Yeah, I think you keep it offline the way you would your breach plan, right? Which is, insurance is really a back end program, right? It's not a proactive protecting device for stopping a malware attack in its tracks. So anything that is all, post incident, whether it's your breach response plan, and certainly your insurance coverage and next steps for putting people into operation to deal with an incident. I think that's always insulated from your system so that it's not one of the things that's exfiltrated.
I think this is a fair point to kind of lead into. We talked about, kind of cyber governance. I'd like to kind of propose a question to the panel. Is corporate use of generative AI a good thing or a bad thing? Thinking about the governance piece.
If nobody else wants it, I'll start.
It's such a hairy topic, Chris. So
It
yeah.
can be, but I mean, at the end of the day, will it be, kind of? I remember, man, I'm dating myself here. I remember you weren't allowed to submit anything electronically or even email the court when I first started practicing. So, it just wasn't considered, it wasn't reliable yet. A lot of law firms didn't even have individual email. So, where are we now? Of course, everybody has email. Some people never even send a letter, which is mind blowing but true. So, will AI eventually be like that? Absolutely. Right now, the big problem that I see for corporate governance is more of a privacy legal issue. Again, if I were to use Microsoft Copilot, that's one thing. If I were to have a large language model in house, again, one thing, as opposed to if I were to put client data into Chat GPT and there's any kind of incident. First of all, getting past that may not even satisfy ABA ethics or state bar ethics. I think we'd run into a real problem if there's any kind of incident. I'm not sure how that's going to impact even, if there's going to be a gross negligence claim that might even be able to come out of that. So there's governance is going to go by a whole lot of how you do this more than whether you do it at this stage.
And I
But
think for any large company, you don't really want to be the guinea pig at this point in time anyway, right? So, I understand if you're at the forefront of technology and this is going to be your revenue stream going forward, that's one situation. But if you're a publicly traded company or organization of any size, I can't imagine you'd want to embrace this in the first phase of its of its evolution, really.
I think it's on a lot of people's roadmap to do as much automation as AI generation as they can, to optimize revenue, remove some of that low-hanging fruit. I think a lot of companies have it on their 2026 roadmap, and adoption to it is going to be very sensitive. Acceptable use policies, in-house LLMs versus external LLMs. I think uploading client documentation to ChatGPT is going to be a horrible, horrible life decision for organizations. It's going to be, what's your acceptable use? Are you keeping it in-house or not? And that's going to be how sophisticated that organization is.
And
then
kind of
I'll chime in. I'll chime in just to kind of echo what Chris was saying. Everyone's going to use it in some respect.
Mm.
Some people are going to make bad mistakes and pay the price for that. Some people are going to do it very well and reap the benefits of doing that. Welcome to a free market economy. Everyone will be tested in how well they use it, and there will be winners and losers, and that's the way business works.
I agree, and it's one of those things. If you're the early adopter, you get to find the vulnerabilities, but you also might get the glory, right? There's you think about all those stories from Who Dares Wins, right? Like the SAS and Special Forces and all that. If they don't do the impossible things, then they don't get done. But this is really about timing. If you're too slow, you're too risk adverse, you're going to fall behind the market, no matter what your industry sector is. And if you're too aggressive, you're going to be the one who finds out that it doesn't work quite the way you thought it did, and you're down.
Yeah.
And Mark, I think we had a subrogation question from someone in the audience.
So the question is there any room for subrogation against an AI2 developer when the AI tool makes a decision that results in a claim against the insured's carriers?
So I think the answer to that is probably theoretically yes, right? Anyone can bring a lawsuit for any purpose, and if someone has caused a covered loss and the insurance company pays, then the insurance company undoubtedly is going to at least think it's got subrogation rights. We could have our whole topic on subrogation and made whole and whether or not there's exceptions to subrogation or anti-subrogation language in vendor contracts. But I think the answer is yes, you will have insurance companies suing third parties for claims they've either paid or claims they've defended, arguing that the AI tool was, negligently designed or recklessly put into the marketplace or what have you. And, we've already seen in the cyberspace insurance companies suing sometimes law firms over the way certain, cyber events have been handled, or suing cyber vendors or software makers or whomever. So I think the short answer is yes, you're going to see some subrogation in this realm. I think one of the challenging things, as at least for the lawyers on this phone, is proving what is inside the black box that went wrong in the AI tool, given that so much of this can be proprietary, while ironically still kind of grabbing from every public source imaginable. So I think you're going to have a lot of litigation, and where the challenges will be met from a plaintiff standpoint is proving that AI is in fact culpable somehow, and that there was some problem with the program.
Thanks, Josh. Chris, kind of shifting gears, what privacy law concerns have you seen arise with engagements that had something to do with AI? And then, frankly, just thinking about 2026 going forward, how do you expect that to change?
Oh boy, a lot of ways, right? So the good news, bad news is we haven't seen a lot of kind of what I'd say AI specific issues arising in privacy, meaning that anything where and Josh couldn't have said it better. Josh, I love that term, right? The black box of AI. That's what I kind of fear is something where AI is used, say, on EMR, on electronic medical records or something like that, for a data processor, and you've got a data controller like a major health system that says, well, which of my data, how was this data processed and which of my data was impacted, and we have no way to tell, or it's very difficult because it was fed into an AI model. Did it breach the contract or some use under the contract? Did it not? There's a lot that I see being an issue there. Thankfully, haven't had to deal with too much. The way that, kind of going back to my earlier example of like the 20,000 logons, the problem is that AI, if someone hasn't seen it yet, one of I don't want to even call them competitors with Arete, who does such a number of these and really knows what they're doing. But like if somebody hasn't seen the use of AI before, and they see this kind of iterative access, and they say this is all data at risk, well, I'm in a situation where perhaps they create a record of that, and now I've got to explain to a regulator why my client said this is not unauthorized access or acquisition of data under the breach notification statute or whatever regulation, and is in fact an AI tool. When I can't see that it's an AI tool, I can just see the AI like behavior. Because you've got to remember, when we're in an incident response, I don't get the benefit of getting the criminal's computer. Brendan never gets to look at that piece. So a lot of times, and what separates, again, a lot of the good DFIR forensics firms from, not as good ones, is it's not just they look at the evidence itself, they also are able to say this evidence means most likely XYZ. We have a low confidence finding or a high confidence finding. So that's been a big issue that's kind of started more in 2025, and it seems to be picking up still in 2026. So my prediction is 2026 is still not going to be the state where we've got the really crazy issues of getting into that black box. I think we're still going to, that'll maybe be at the end of 2026, but I guess it could come sooner. But I think we're really going to continue to see a lot more of just people seeing for the first time how threat actors actually use it and trying to make legal determinations based on that. I don't think we're going to see a lot of states. Of course, we don't have a blanket federal protection, except in certain industries through certain regulations. I don't think we're going to see a lot of states able to adapt to or adjust to or even want to address AI. I think we're going to be trying to continue to shoehorn privacy concerns and incident response under the existing law.
So, thinking about kind of the use of artificial intelligence in the claims data collection process. How have you seen that change over the last year, or what are your predictions for the next year or two?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So first of all, claims data is through the roof. I actually, so having the kind of forensic background and that magical ability of being able to translate tech to English, I saw a need here at Mullen Coughlin to form a group that actually deals with the information requests because there's so many attorney-client privilege issues. Obviously, coverage, which impacts the tripartite relationship, the ethical relationship, which is why I'm often almost like crying in joy when I see Josh jump on and the Anderson team jump on because they get to talk about coverage. Whereas if I'm representing the client who is my client, I also can't get into discussions of coverage because of the ethical rule. So the where I kind of came down was because of my experience there. I formed this group that specializes in this data collection. We went from just a couple of carriers to now we're at 26 with robust data collection practices. Some are at the end, way after the claim is paid out, don't really implicate coverage, but do implicate the attorney-client privilege. Some are explicitly and expressly used to determine coverage, which can create a whole lot of issues, needless to say. I see that what I saw was each and every one of them with data collection practices went from kind of here's our questionnaire to here's our questionnaire and we want to be able to code it to be able to feed it into an AI model. Help us to figure that out. That's a conversation that happened throughout 2025 and nobody could really I haven't seen anybody quite get their hands around what they're doing with the data and vis-a-vis an AI model. I think that's going to get figured out by a few people. I think we are going to see some carriers doing more of utilizing AI tools with the data that's collected with the attendant issues that come with AI use.
And Mark and Chris, I think we just got a question that segues into some of those points you've gone into, and the question was from an adjuster basically saying if they have a client that has cyber coverage and the client has a security incident, must they use the vendors that the cyber insurance company appoints? Again, there's a lot of variety in the whatever 67 to 75 different primary forms out there, but I think it is pretty customary for the insurance company to have a panel of forensic people, breach coaches, PR people. So you do usually are confined to a certain slate. I think the good news for policyholders is that most of those companies know what they're doing. People like Brendan, people like Chris, who do this every day, every year, and know the protocols inside out. I think one of the questions asked by the audience member is, well, is there a risk that if the insurance company appoints all these people, they see kind of all the confidential details, and then will they go to the insurance company with information that may imperil insurance coverage? And I think our experience, because we've been through this a few times where there's some issue that the insurance company is harping on in the insurance application, is I think most vendors, if they have any kind of integrity, will stay out of that fight, will sensitize the policyholder client that there is this coverage issue, that they should get coverage counsel or advice on how to do that. But I think most, at least the breach attorneys I've seen, have usually been good, sensitive to it, stay out of the fight, and let coverage counsel or the policyholder know at least that there's this issue brewing. Be very, very careful because, my own view is that when you have a cyber incident, you're not dealing with your friendly underwriter anymore. You're dealing with the claims team. that take a very different view of things, which is they're looking, in my view, as to ways to either limit or avoid payment. And so the underwriter, who's more of a business person and wants the relationship, is not really the person you're having these discussions with come claims time. So yes, good question. Be very careful out there. And I think in our experience, most of the vendors have been very sensitive to this issue and do not throw their client under the bus.
And Mark, if I could cycle this kind of vigilance that Josh is advocating for back to what Chris was saying just a moment ago about use of AI tools by insurance company in data collection and claims handling. People who've been watching the webinars that we've been putting on for the past 2 years will know that I've been warning that this is going to happen, that insurance claims departments are going to develop tools that they will put to use in the claims handling process. And there's a lot of room for valuable, good tools there. There's also a lot of room for tools that are only valuable to the insurance company and harmful to their policyholders. And this is another area where I think vigilance is critical. I appreciate Chris's foresight and acknowledgement of the risks that are associated with that evolution. This is important that everyone involved in this industry keep their eye on that and make sure that the technologies that are being deployed for everyone's benefit.
And I think at time of underwriting, you really want to understand if you're staying with the incumbent insurance carrier and or moving, who their panel is, and then updating your incident response plan so it incorporates those particular vendors. Perhaps you can have an onboarding call prior to help reduce any type of business interruption loss on the post end. The last thing you want to be doing is interviewing a Chris or a Brendan when the house is on fire, quote unquote.
No, that's a great idea.
So when we're thinking about kind of the attorney-client privileges that or how AI implicates the attorney-client privilege, does it affect it at all?
It certainly could. Anytime there's a communication with a third party, you have the risk of privilege waiver, right? And that's always going to be an issue. So depending on where it's hosted, depending on who potentially sees it, depending on the terms of service, depending on, and now this is the fun part about AI. If I'm putting something into the Microsoft platform, just like in SharePoint, and Microsoft changes its terms of service, say Microsoft can, in order to make sure we cooperate with law enforcement, look at anything you put in there. It's kind of a law school problem for privilege, right? Is anyone ever really going to argue that, by an attorney using SharePoint, they've waived all client privilege has been waived for whatever's in there? It's more of a law school problem. Let's get real. And if Microsoft has an incident, it's a very different thing than somebody else. But AI is different. If it ingests your data, it uses it, it learns from it, and that same knowledge could show up in its answers to somebody else. Now, is that also kind of a law school or a theoretical problem that anyone would ever be able to identify its information? Maybe, but I think in terms of pharmaceuticals, I think in terms of aerospace engineering, and where you have patented information about specific process, and then an AI model being asked about a particular detail, and then volunteering information it learned from a different client. It could get very dicey in that way. And does that then, so do law firms also have to worry about that if I use Chat GPT, which is public, right, over something else? Arguably, yes, and especially in an area where where that kind of information could be impacted, because a lot of incidents are never made public. So a lot of the details that I am privy to, no one will ever know, and that's often a good result. But if I were to use ChatGPT to go through my emails, which I'm not, just let's be clear, and it somehow that information got out, then could it be used in litigation? Well, I'm creative when I'm thinking in terms of the law, when I'm in an adversarial proceeding, or when I was more in the past. I would certainly find a way to use that if I could. So I can imagine that is very much a consideration. I'm not seeing it right now, but I do see where it's headed. I do see a problem, and somebody's going to step on that landmine.
Yeah, I agree. It's a narrow band of protected information that would be identifiable when encountered on an AI tool. But there's lots of lawyers who are smart and aggressive enough to know to ask the question of a witness, did you ever put this information into a chatbot or into an AI tool? And if the witness answers truthfully yes, then an aggressive lawyer can say, aha, you've waived the privilege and I want all of that turned over to me. That's a real risk.
Well, Marshall, just to kind of build off of that for a second, I actually want to ask you, one thing that we saw a lot, and what prompted me to really want to form a group that specializes in answering these questions is insurance folks who work in insurance. Mark, you know this to be true. You can be the best at what you do. That does not mean you've ever spent a day taking a SANS course and learning DFIR. And some of this is complicated. Like if I said yes, or if I said yes to MFA on an application, and one of the findings is there's no MFA in place, that doesn't matter if it's a exploitation of a vulnerability that bypasses authentication. It's not material, right? Materiality under the policy. So Marshall, I guess kind of what I'm asking, or what I'm wondering your thoughts are, is knowing already that it's hard enough for an insurance professional to learn all this and decipher everything that's coming out of everybody's mouth on this. I wonder what the risk is then of an AI tool that's kind of over summarizing, and you have an insurance decision that's negative to the insured, um, based on information that's kind of misinterpreted by the AI. What happens then, and how you see that playing out?
Yeah, that's the risk that I've been warning about, right? Is that you can get reliance on, there's two things. One, you get reliance on tools that maybe don't do as good of a job as a human does. Two is you get tools that are designed to do an excellent job at a zero-sum game that assists the insurance company and harms the policyholder. And that sort of bad faith and bad acting is prohibited under existing regs, but may not always be easy to detect. Certainly not in a one-off situation. I know that I was underpaid because that tool did that to me. That requires a tremendous amount of vigilance and integrity to flush that out.
This is a perfect segue into kind of the next question. One of the most common things we're seeing on client calls now is their AI note takers joining before they even join. So my question to the panel, are these AI note takers a good thing because they help efficiencies and allow people to have more efficient conversations? Or perhaps to Marshall's point, maybe they're not doing as good of a job as a human and they might be getting things wrong and then people are then utilizing that information. So good thing or bad thing, AI note takers?
My team, once we see an AI note taker, we immediately stop talking until counsel tells us to continue.
That's
Most times we
counsel will
request
get
that they
very
stop.
angry.
Yes. Yeah. We've worked together a few times. So we immediately stop talking if you see an automated note taker or an automated bot join the chat, because we don't want to talk about anything that may be sensitive, confidential, because we don't know where those notes are going. We don't know who's got visibility into that data set. Very frequently, counsel will stop the discussion and ask, "Hey, can you please eject that bot? We don't need that here. We want to maintain privilege over this conversation, so we don't know how those notes are going to be used or where they're going to be used." So definitely from my team side is we stop until we have confirmation that somebody's accepting the risk, because there is a risk to where that data goes.
Well, bingo. That's exactly right. As you can tell, we're on the same page here. That's even just for a minute. Remember that sometimes these bots are not clearly identified, even what they are. Meaning that if this could be a transcription service that sends to a third party overseas for accuracy transcription or enriching the data, at which point you now have clearly a third party. You would clearly have an argument that the privilege is gone. So yeah, we eject them so fast, and that's going to continue to be the case. I don't see that changing in 2026. I do know that it's going to happen one day. I think that the note takers, kind of known note takers, will be will be acceptable. But for right now, the default is kick them out.
Yep, agreed.
So a couple questions have come in since we started talking. What about cases of incidental collection by AI tools, i.e., Gmail summarizing emails with their AI? Does this still waive privacy?
So privilege wise, does it waive privilege, or because you could create a separate incident called a breach. A breach is a legally defined term where you take protected information and expose it to an unintended or unauthorized party. But privilege, attorney-client privilege, or the work product doctrine, that blanket protection that we attorneys can afford, it's all going to depend. If it goes, there are some law firms, for example, who have built their own LLMs, large language models, so that the data is never leaving the law firm. So is that going to create a violation or a waiver of the privilege? I don't see how there's an argument for that. I think that stays within the privilege. But if there is any kind of third party hosting, enrichment, it gets out to a third party, then you have an issue.
And the question may go a bit beyond even privilege, right? It may just go to these notions of privacy. So for those of us who have dealt with clients who are in the health care space, we're seeing a lot of class action litigation, basically saying that when certain technology is used and a patient's interacting with a provider and that information is then harnessed and analyzed and synthesized by some third-party software app maker, that there is this violation of privacy and therefore it's actionable. I think, again, those are good questions. And in this environment, if you've got, protected health information, if you've got any really form of PII, not just going into the realm of attorney-client privilege, which Chris is right, is super sensitive and important. But I think you have to err on the side that am I creating a class action risk? Am I in an industry that class action lawyers are actively targeting? And if you're in certain spaces, certainly the healthcare space, you have to be very careful with anything that's synthesizing information, eavesdropping potentially on a communication between a patient and a provider or a medical insurance company or anything of the like. There's a good chance that a class action lawyer will pick up on it. And if one picks up on it, 100 pick up on it. So that's your risk. And even if you have a meritorious defense and you win, that may be $3 million later after your defense costs.
So, Josh Marshall, another question came in. I think this might be for you guys. Do you see a basis for policyholders asserting bad faith claims based off of insurers' over-reliance on AI tools in their claims handling?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was talking about before, and we've been warning about from the beginning. It depends on the use, right? If you're relying on an AI tool that's facilitating the claims handling process and results in cost savings that get shared equally throughout the consumer provider spectrum, that doesn't strike me as bad faith at all. But if on the other hand you get tools that play a zero-sum game, help the insurance company, hurt the policyholder, you'll absolutely see. Josh was just mentioning healthcare. There's already bad faith claims in a class action context against some health insurance companies who had used the algorithmic tool to target release dates from a rehab facility, from a hospital, based on average time spent in the rehab facility or the hospital. And the imperative at the insurance company, allegedly, and there's whistleblowers to back this up, was I want everyone out of the hospital by the average discharge date. Well, for an average discharge date, some people get out sooner, some people get out later. And the people who get out later have doctors and nurses who say, this person still can't perform normal activities of daily living. We can't send them home from the hospital yet. And the doctor will write into the insurance company and say, no, this person won't be discharged. And then the insurance company claims handler was told, follow what the algorithm says. And I want those people out by the average date. And some of those people, God bless them, came forward and said, this is what's going on in my company. And now the company's being sued in class actions around the country. So yeah, I think I've predicted that we're going to see that sort of inappropriate use, and the people who use it will, and hopefully eventually, have to answer for that.
Marshall, I know that you've been very familiar, you familiarize yourself with kind of the latest policy wording and these new affirmative AI insurance companies that are effectively trying to target and provide affirmative coverage for some of the exclusions that are starting to come out into the marketplace. Are they getting traction? Anything you can share with the listeners?
It's a really interesting thing to monitor and evaluate. I My impression is that there's a lot of heavy breathing around the AI exclusions. That I remember when we did one of our first talks, I don't remember if it was in person or on a webinar about AI and insurance. We had a wording and this was like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. We had a wording expert on from London who had said, even at that time, that he'd been tasked with developing some language around AI exclusions. I guess they would have been exclusions. But he described it at the time as, kind of a exploratory exercise. Like, how would we define AI, and how would we want to do this? But he was clear that they'd never been asked to draft an exclusion that was going to be implemented. They just were thinking through what could possibly be necessary in the future. Over the past year, there have been leaks, and they're literally admittedly leaks of exclusions that have been drafted by a few different insurance companies. And I'm not talking specifically about exclusions for use in cyber, but rather they were described as exclusions that would be used in GL or DNO context, things like that. And people who want to promote standalone products, make a lot of noise about these endorsements are coming into the marketplace. I haven't seen them come into the marketplace at least in the cyber. I think there is some place for AI exclusions. And Mark, you probably know better than me to the extent to which they might be implemented in certain cyber type risks. But I haven't heard of anyone who has an exclusion put on their policy in a traditional insurance product context. And it feels like there are market forces that drive this, right? And I was thinking about this, over the past couple months. Some risks have such a high tendency to create high level and dollar losses that the market responds to it by imposing exclusions, right? So when SARS-CoV-1 happened, and there were lots of huge BI losses in Asia, we saw widespread dispersal of virus exclusions in policies, right? When 9/11 happened, terrorism exclusions all over the place. You think about just the development of the automobile. So I'm thinking of AI as a transformative technology. The automobile was a transformative technology. And it turns out that automobiles, after they got bigger and faster, hurt a lot of people. And there was a risk that existed that required deeper thinking about, how do we price this risk? I don't want to cover it anymore. Too many people are getting hurt and killed, right? We don't see that with AI yet. At least not in a GL, DNO, property traditional marketplace. And we have a soft marketplace. So if an insurance company is developing an AI exclusion that they're thinking of adding on a GL policy, well, if you're an insurance buyer and you have one insurance company that tries to put an exclusion on your policy and another that wouldn't dare, you're always going to steer your business to the one who wouldn't dare. So those market forces are going to drive people away from AI exclusions, and they're really going to put any insurance company that wants to try to use that exclusion at risk of losing a lot of their market share. So I think we're seeing that play out, and we'll continue to see it play out, and we'll come to learn, is AI a transformative technology that brings with it an incredible risk of loss? I don't think we've seen that yet. And until we do, I don't think we're going to see widespread take up of AI exclusions. And that's just one random lawyer's prediction.
Marshall, I would say just as of right now, I would agree with you. Given the market being still such a soft market, we would be pushing back on the incumbent carrier. If the incumbent carrier said this is an absolute exclusion that cannot be removed, nor removed for an additional premium, we then would be looking to effectively move to a new carrier that does not have this limiting exclusion on it. So with that being said, I guess closing remarks, we'll just do around the kind of the horn. We have 1 minute left. Josh, would you like to go first?
Sure. I mean, just to follow up on what Marshall and you were saying, Mark, about AI exclusions, I don't see AI exclusions really taking a hold, but what I do see the insurance industry probably trying to do is utilize sublimits as a way to minimize their exposure. And we're seeing that a lot now with cyber extortion, ransomware. We've seen it with PCI coverage over the years. So I think policyholders, whether it's AI sublimit issues or cyber extortion issues, be very, very careful with sublimits, because I think it's the insurance company's way of adding an exclusion with a term that's not actually entitled exclusion.
Josh, Brendan?
I think in closing, I think AI is going to be a tool set that we're going to continue to see more and more growth, more and more adoption to in the coming years. We're going to see organizations put this on their agenda, on their platform moving forward as growth potential. It's going to be acceptance and moderation. I think that's really what we're going to see in the AI platform coming forward.
Chris?
Yeah, I think that this is another one of those situations where you have to understand what you're doing. There's this principle of security that you can't protect what you don't know you have. You have to understand it. You have to understand where the data is going. Where is it hosted? How's it being used? That's the only way you can understand the privacy concerns. And then you have to realize as well, adoption of early adoption of AI. If the bad thing happens, you're in a situation where you may be dealing with a lot of people who don't understand what you're telling them has happened. You're going to have that education piece ready to go. So, good times.
And Marshall?
I'll just take my moment to thank you, Mark, for helping to lead the conversation. It's a really interesting conversation, and one that we've all been having with each other for several years now, and I look forward to continuing to have. Where I'm only a phone call away to bounce ideas off of, and I'm excited to continue to do that.
Thank you for everybody who joined today's webinar, and look forward to speaking with you all at a later date. Here's the contact information if you'd like to reach any of the panelists that were a part of today's conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.